Good evening and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Tuesday, May 15th, 2012. When you hear about Mexico and Arizona, it is often in the context of illegal immigration, border violence, and other serious issues. But some people are trying to raise awareness about another aspect of this relationship that can have benefits for people on both sides of the border. Tonight we are joined by Tucson businessman Alex Rodriguez. He is the founder of Client Attraction Strategy Group, and he recently returned from Washington, D.C., where he participated in a meeting with the White House Business Council. Alex, thanks for being here.
Tony, it's good to be back with you.
So what about this meeting in Washington, D.C. with the White House Business Council? How did this come about and why were you one of the participants?
So the White House Business Council has been having discussions with business leaders from every state in the union. And on the 24th of April, they convened Arizona's delegation to Washington, D.C., where we met at the White House. And as you mentioned, there were about 15 or 20, mainly Phoenix-based. We live in such a Phoenix-centric state in Arizona, but I was invited by the recommendation of Phoenix-based leaders.
And there were multiple discussions there. Let's talk about what I just mentioned in the introduction, the vital role that Mexico plays in Arizona's economy. What did you want to say about that?
Well, that was a crucial piece of the almost a full day deliberations back and forth. The U.S.-Mexico relationship is a vital one. It's a strategic relationship for the United States. In fact, just in 2012 or 11 alone, we reached a record trade relationship with Mexico. Over $460 billion of goods and services going back and forth between both nations. And Tony, that's very significant. 18 years ago, when NAFTA went into force, we have now achieved a five-fold increase in that time period to what is now $460 billion trade relationship.
So what were some of the recommendations that you had? For example, we were speaking prior to this interview about the need for more customs agents so that there is more legal movement back and forth?
Yes, that's obviously very important to this relationship. As we have ramped up border security over the last several years, one of the consequences of that is longer wait times associated with either commercial or pedestrian crossing between both states, Sonora and Arizona. And so recently there was a new expansion that just opened up at the Mariposa Trade Port of Entry in Nogales. And while that's going to be very important, what we now need is the manpower in order to assure a better and more efficient flow of people and goods and services between both states.
Another topic that was discussed in Washington, D.C. was foreclosure, specifically as to its impact in Arizona.
Yes, so the national, there's a neighborhood stabilization program that's been in effect for several years now, and Tucson has an opportunity to obtain about $27 million that would go to help abate the foreclosure problem that causes blight in neighborhoods. So what's happening is there's a federal role to help make sure that we turn foreclosed homes into affordable housing. And so that's one of the areas that came up. It's pending legislation, in fact, right now, and it's yet another opportunity for Southern Arizona.
So we often hear about these meetings, for example, with the White House Business Council or other organizations, whether they be state or federal, and people say, yeah, is it just about talking or something? Does something really get accomplished? Well, how would you respond to that?
Well, it's vital to be at the table. If you're not at the table, then your issues and concerns aren't being raised. In fact, only had we not been there for Southern Arizona, there wouldn't be a voice for Tucson and our region. So it's very important to be there, but have specific items that you want to advocate for. In this case, what we need are about 200 customs agents to help improve the flow of people, goods, and services in Southern Arizona.
Because we were talking about the fact that you have so much legal trade and people coming here legally,
yes.
Sometimes they are discouraged if there's a long line at the border.
Oh, that clearly happens. On average, families, Mexican nationals coming here legitimately, legally, to shop at the foothills here, in Scottsdale, Fashion Square up in Phoenix, the border environment, they're dissuaded from coming when they have to sit for hours and hours on the ports of entry. So this would help mitigate that and help bring in consumer dollars into the Arizona economy. So we see it as a quality of life issue for the state of Arizona, especially in this economic environment.
And so what's next? I haven't attended this meeting in Washington, D.C. What goes from here on?
So what we earned is an ability to have a line of communication with senior decision makers in Washington, D.C. There's an ongoing two-way dialogue of information flow. For example, even today, they're discussing more information with respect to the foreclosure issue with members of the White House Business Council. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. And for us, that's very important because from a business leader perspective, one of the clear consensuses that emerged that day was a need for more communication out of Washington, D.C. to help business leaders better able to stimulate the economy locally.
And then finally, in about 20 seconds or so, can the average person get involved? Can he or she make a difference in all of this?
Absolutely. There's a number of ways to chime in. Of course, there's the White House that has a website. It's incredibly transparent. They're moving in various areas to be able to open more information that would be of value and at a premium to the private sector.
All right, Alex Rodriguez, thanks for being here, and good luck with what you decide to do in the future.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much. Now we hear more about economic growth from business leaders in Arizona's largest metropolitan area. This segment comes to us from KAET, our sister television station in Phoenix.
The just concluded state legislative session included a series of tax cuts for businesses and individuals. Lawmakers also killed a tax credit measure designed to help Arizona grow its film industry. Here to tell us if the legislature did the right things to grow the state's economy is Glenn Hammer, President and CEO of the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Barry Broom, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, and ASU economist Dennis Hoffman, who directs the Seidman Research Institute for the W.P. Carey School of Business. Good to have you all here. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
Let's start, Glenn, with an overall view of the session from a business standpoint. What did you see?
It was a fantastic session, Ted. We passed the second annual once-in-a-generation competitiveness package. And, of course, I'm kidding a little bit there, but we built very smartly on the tax reform package that passed last year. We added a very sizable capital gains tax reform, net operating loss. We made some of the tax credits that passed in the last several years more usable. There's a very important infrastructure bill that also passed, and additionally, we made additional progress on civil justice reform, regulatory reform. It was a spectacular session. The last 48 hours broke the right way.
All right, and I want to get to some of these ideas that you mentioned in a second here, but overall, Barry, from a bird's eye view, what did you see?
I thought it was very good. I think, Glenn, summarized it in a really important way. I think a lot of the policies that the legislature passed this time were much more strategic and impactful on things like export industries. We also had the elective sales factor for service industries, which people refer to as the Apollo bill. But, service industries are becoming much more complex. They're exporting resources and services abroad. They're now getting treated like an Intel or a Honeywell or a Boeing. Expanding the investment tax credit from the renewable industry to all export industries was a very smart, aggressive move. And the 9,000 job tax credit is now uncapped, so a company like Apple that would come in here and create 4,000 jobs would actually get the benefit of all the tax credits. And then some of the environmental issues that Glenn brought up I thought were also very impactful.
Okay, Dennis, what did you see this session?
Well,
I
think I defer to my colleagues here in terms of the detail and deliverables for businesses. I think that's a great thing. I think that business, we need to be very kind to business in the state, that businesses create our jobs. And I've always been a supporter of having a very kind tax and regulatory environment when it comes to businesses. Now, I would say in terms of the session, I saw some pluses, and some of it is addition by subtraction. We're not in an environment where we're making massive cuts and being on the front line with a lot of those cuts in the past. That's a good thing. I think that it was very refreshing to see the legislature, even though they dabbled with these crazy Tabor rules and growth government spending restriction rules, they backed they backed away at the end, and we didn't get those types of regulations. And I think that that's very good. It's a signal that the legislature wants to take on that budgeting commitment, and I think that that's a very important thing for them to do. And we had some wins, I think, in terms of education, some small wins in terms of education, and got some equity funding for the universities. So, all in all, coupled with the detail you can get from these gentlemen about the benefits that specific benefits that accrue to business, I think it was a good session.
Glenn, let's get to some of those details. The individual corporate capital gains tax cut. How much? What kind of impact?
Well, it'll phase into, it'll scale up to 25%. It'll start at 10%, go to 20, and then I believe 25%. The impact here is, we expect will be pretty sizable. And Dennis Hoffman has also put together papers on the capital gains tax reform. We have to remember this is one of the most volatile taxes. One of the neat things is probably for the first time we're going to really be able to accurately measure what this tax collects. But this is a great tax reform for those that want to invest capital. And the history on the federal side has been that when capital gains taxes have been cut, more revenue has come in because of the additional activity.
But yet, critics will say capital gains tax cuts usually means, folks, they're not creating jobs, they're not investing in the community or in getting manufacturing, et cetera. They're buying more stocks. They're looking at real estate, these sorts of things. Is that a valid criticism?
Well, it's, the key thing when we work on things like the elective sales factor connected back to export industries, or a monetized tax credit for emerging technology, they're much easier to measure. I think it's easier to raise questions about the capital gains tax because it's tougher to track back to activity. But in a state that has a lot of need for liquidity for small businesses, creating an improved transactional environment around technology, there are also some benefits to that you can trace back.
What do you think, Dennis? How easy is it to trace the success of capital gains tax cuts?
Well, now, again, these are gains on investments made after December 31st, 2011, as I understand it. So we're not talking about investments that are already been made, that realizations that folks could just bring forward. So we're going to have to watch this, I think, very carefully. Glenn's exactly right. My paper pointed to the volatility of this as a source, and actually the point I made was, it didn't make sense to me to try to fund predictable things like kids in schools, prisoners in prisons, access rolls, university students, very predictable expenses on this roller coaster of capital gains revenues. But of course my intent was we need to replace this revenue source with something else. And I don't hear any dialogue about replacing it with anything.
Well, let's talk about that as far as concerns with revenue. And obviously the last session, big jobs bill, big job creation bill, 500 and some odd, 538, something like that jobs bill. Now you've got something along those lines. Now you've got these particular incentives and tax credits and such. Much of this is hitting as a temporary sale, as the proverbial cliff is approaching. Is there a concern regarding revenue?
We need to make sure, Ted, that we really get the Arizona jobs machine going again. Let's take a look at what's happened since last year's bill passed. Now CEO Magazine ranks Arizona as one of the top 10 states. That's a big deal. Kaufman ranks us as the #1 state in the country when it comes to entrepreneurial activity. As more jobs come back, you could take it to the bank. We're going to see more tax revenue come into this state.
They were the most wanted men of the Third Reich, notorious Nazi war criminals who were complicit in Hitler's atrocities.
If he wanted us dead, we would be dead.
It's a series that uncovers the dramatic pursuit of infamous Nazi fugitives in chases leading around the globe.
South America, you could make your way by bribing everybody.
The incredible true stories of the Nazi hunters.
Tonight at 8 on PBS HD, Arizona Public Media.
An unplanned pregnancy can bring up a whole host of emotions for an expectant mother, especially if she doesn't feel she's ready to assume these vital responsibilities. Next, Luis Carrion tells us about an agency in Tucson that offers some guidance for women that find themselves grappling with the implications of bringing a new life into the world.
beautiful.
The act of putting together a scrapbook for a child is something that most parents have done at some point or another. It's a process that is done out of love, and it's meant to memorialize those treasured milestones of a family that is growing.
Part of putting together the scrapbook for me was putting some energy. I still had energy to put into Trevor, and I was kind of, just memorializing my part and my love for him. But he knows I'm his buddy. He knows I belong to him.
Mary Koenig is a parent and a grandparent. She has 3 children, and her role as a mother, one she takes very seriously, has led her to create scrapbooks for all of her kids. But she says Trevor, the subject of this scrapbook, has lived with adoptive parents since birth.
I went to his 3rd birthday party here. But 11 years ago, I got pregnant with Trevor, and I was not married at the time, and I had teenage children, and just realizing how hard it was. I was a single parent, and realizing how hard it was for them to grow up in a single parent family, had decided that I wanted this child to have a 2-parent family, and so I pursued adoption for him.
When you first meet Koenig, it's clear that putting up her child for adoption was not an easy decision for her. She's had 3 pregnancies in her life, and she says she values each of her children equally, including Trevor, who she gave up for the sake of what she says is a better life with another family.
Choosing adoption goes against kind of everything that you feel as a mother. I even had some people that didn't think that I could choose adoption because my role as a mother is always something that I've enjoyed and was very important to me. I wrote a letter to all my friends and family on how to they could help me, and My Heart Will Go On was my theme song. It boiled down to, as a mom, you want to give the best to your child, and what was the best that I could do for Trevor, and it didn't seem like my situation was the best. I was working 2 jobs already. I didn't know how an infant would fit into trying to provide and have that child in daycare, and I felt like he would be raised by somebody else anyway. And then this is our family and their match letter, the letter that made me choose them.
According to Koenig, the decision to carry her 3rd child to term was a done deal from the beginning. Abortion was never an option for her, and she says her Christian faith precluded any other considerations.
It just depends on, what's happening with them in their lives at that moment.
Sissy Peace is a pregnancy assistant counselor with Christian Family Care Agency. The agency provides assistance and counseling for women dealing with unplanned pregnancies.
And we have 2 options in our agency. It is either parenting or adoption. Abortion is not an option in my counseling at all. Christine and I were just working...
Peace says she deals with an array of women. Her objective is to match the birth mother with a Christian family.
It is the first gate they all have to go through.
Yeah.
To make it through the process.
She says she strives for an open adoption that will allow the biological mother to maintain contact with her child.
We needed a home available for this baby just born.
We try to bring adoptive families to the realization of what is open adoption. And open adoption is just that.
It's most of my family, and Sarah is
to bring 2 families together that love this one child. One is giving a gift, the other one is being entrusted with that gift to take care of that, and they come together to further the well-being of that baby.
According to the staff here at the Christian Family Care Agency, there are no reasons to consider any options other than carrying a pregnancy to term.
Oh, my goodness.
As Mary Koenig looks through the scrapbook of her child, she agrees. She's one of many people motivated by her faith and pressed by the reality of her life to consider giving up her child to another family.
I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe that God breathes life into me. This child had a right to be born, so I just needed to find out where his family would be.
You can find more information on this topic by logging onto our website at azpm.org.
Sometimes they get to see where the baby is staying, they see the room.
When people speak about motherhood and adoption, the conversation sometimes leads to more controversial topics like birth control and abortion. And one organization is often in the spotlight when it comes to these topics. In fact, Governor Jan Brewer recently approved a law that bans state funding to Planned Parenthood. Tonight, we are joined by CEO and President Brian Howard about some possible implications. Brian, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So this law that was passed by Governor Brewer, signed by Governor Brewer, she says that she doesn't want tax dollars going to Planned Parenthood because it's going to be used for abortions. What do you want to say about that?
Well, it's ironic because the language in the law says that women may not come to Planned Parenthood because we're the only provider in the state that it applies to for family planning services, which is basically birth control. So this is really targeting the state's Medicaid program, which is known as Access, targeting Planned Parenthood, and the clients of that program are poor women. So the bottom line is poor women won't be able to get birth control at Planned Parenthood. That's all the law does, no matter what the governor says about it.
So this is one of many states, or several states at least, that is passing legislation to, quote, defund Planned Parenthood because people are opposed to abortions. What do you see that? You see this as part of a national campaign against this organization? How would you describe it?
Well, there is an extraordinary, the war on women is some language that's been used, and assault is another word that's been used, but it is pretty extraordinary. Here in Arizona, in just this legislative session, 6 bills were passed by the legislature and signed by the governor that make it harder for women to get health care or to pay for their health care, and specifically for family planning services, and in the cases of some of the bills, abortion care. But in a state where we're still struggling economically, where too many people are still out of work, the legislature found time to tackle this topic, and it's extraordinary.
So what are other services that are provided by Planned Parenthood? Obviously, abortion is one of them. What other services do you have in this area in the state? And then what about the number of offices or centers that you have?
Sure. We have 14 health centers in the state of Arizona, including 2 here in the Tucson area. We see about 45,000 patients a year, and 4 out of 5 come to us for prevention-oriented care. In other words, birth control, cancer screenings, and testing and treatment for sexually transmitted infections. We're also now adding in some of our health centers primary care because we're seeing families continuing to struggle to afford access to those basic health care services.
So would not providing abortions be an option for Planned Parenthood? In other words, if let's say you stop doing that and then people are, quote, happier with the organization in the state, do you think that would be an option?
Well, I think that people have the people who are opposed to us, and it's a minority of Arizonans. And the last poll we did in October was about 18% of Arizonans had a negative impression of Planned Parenthood. But those people who do, I think, object to something more than abortion. They object to sort of our larger mission, which is about empowering women of all ages and all backgrounds to make their own health care decisions. And that's our vision, and it's something that makes some people uncomfortable.
And then back to defunding Planned Parenthood for abortion services. Texas also passed similar legislation. Indiana, what are they doing, and does Arizona plan to do the same insofar as legal challenges, perhaps?
Sure. Well, our primary concern is ensuring that the women who will be affected by this law continue to get access to the health care that they need. And we're looking at doing that in 2 ways. One is replacing the funds that would have come from the state with private fundraising. And number 2, looking at the option of going to court. These are basic preventive health care services that are, by federal law, required to be a part of the Medicaid program. There's clear boundaries about how we use the money. And so we believe we'd be justified in going to court, as has already been done in Texas and Indiana.
Any idea when that might be decided as far as going to court?
Well, typically, most of these laws go into effect 90 days after the legislature adjourned, which was about 10 days ago. And so the clock started ticking, I think that's somewhere in August, and we'll need to make those decisions before then.
And then finally, how is Planned Parenthood funded in Arizona? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about where the money comes from.
Sure. In descending order of importance, the majority of our funding, and we have a budget of about $13 million a year, the significant majority of those funds comes to us from patients contributing to the cost of their own health care. The second biggest segment is charitable donations from private individuals, and the third is a small amount of federal funding.
Okay, Brian Howard, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Cinco de Mayo is often associated with partying and drinking, so you might not think many people would be interested in running 10 kilometers the morning after the festivities. However, that's what many Tucsonans did on Sunday, the 6th of May, and it's tonight's video postcard from photographer and editor Santiago Bati. You can get more news and information on our website, azpm.org. To comment on any story you saw tonight, click on it online and go to the bottom. We can also be reached via Facebook and Twitter. Coming up tomorrow night, we'll have a special one-hour presentation of Arizona Illustrated as part of Your Vote 2012. It's a forum with the 3 candidates for U.S. Congressional District 8, formerly held by Representative Gabrielle Giffords. We'll speak to Democrat Ron Barber, Republican Jesse Kelly, and Green Party member Charlie Manolakis. We hope you can join us. I'm Tony Paniagua from all of us at Arizona Public Media. Have a great night.